The British Safety Council have decided to launch in India for a number of reasons. The first is that we've actually been doing business in India for over 30 years, but doing it on an export model basis means that we can only deal with a very small number of some of the largest customers, the Tatas, Reliance, GBK. Having our own local operation in India will give us a much greater reach and allow us to get to be able to support a much larger number of companies. And that's important because India as a country has not a very good health and safety record. It may be a country that's trying to put men into space, but it also has 400 million of the world's poorest workers working in some of the worst conditions. So putting those two facts together really is why we are looking to set up a local operation in India. In India specifically, because the state of legislation in India means that a lot of workers aren't protected. And that's resulted in some quite shocking statistics in that there are probably, it's estimated, 48,000 deaths a year in India in the workplace. And from a population of 500 million workers, that's roughly 1 in 11,000 workers have a fatality. Now, compared to the UK, that's over 20 times the figure. And therefore, we think that we can add a lot of value in that market and have an impact and help reduce that rate of fatalities. Rana Plaza was a tragic event. Over 1,100 people killed, a building collapse, an 8th-floor building that had only been permitted to be 5 stories, and 3 stories had been added illegally, built on a swamp without adequate safety procedures, and even when cracks had been spotted the day before in the building, whereas the staff in the retail stores obviously didn't go back to work the following days, the factory workers did. They were threatened with a month's pay deduction if they didn't go to work, and they did go to work, and the building collapsed. Now, it has had a transformational effect in terms of, I think, how the world looks at developing countries, especially in the garment sector. They were all garment factories within Rana Plaza. And the accord that was put together, which brought the businesses that in the developed world, the unions together with the local factories, has had an impact. However, not the level of impact that is really needed. And just to sort of explain a little more what I mean about that, the original accord only covered about half of the factories, about half of the 4.5 million workers who work in that industry. There is a new accord that is being signed as we speak, which will cover more of the sector. But as a result, although 75% of garment factories have improved their safety, only a few hundred of the 4,500 have been certified as safe. Now, partly that is because there simply aren't enough inspectors, although 350 more inspectors have been recruited, and the programme is estimated to have cost nearly $300 million. That's what's been put into improving safety. But it is still simply not enough. And to give you an example of that, only last week there was a boiler explosion at a garment factory in Dhaka. Only 13 people died, which is fortunate because the factory was empty. It was having some maintenance at the time. 6,000 workers normally work at that factory. And that building had been inspected under the accord. It had been inspected twice, but not for boiler explosions. So the accord was focused on fire and building safety, and yes, there have been improvements there, but overall, if you look at worker safety more generally, there are still very, very significant issues in the garment industry in the whole of the Indian subcontinent. So what we've learned over the years, I think fundamentally is that it's really about people, it's not about legislation. However, when you look at the standard of legislation in some of these markets, it is what has to underpin everything else. So the legislation is important, but once that legislation is in place, then adherence to it will only get you a certain way. It then really is about people, it's about leadership, it's about engagement, and it's about culture. That is probably the biggest thing we've learned working in the UK for the last 60 years, and what we want to bring to the Indian subcontinent. I think you start with the largest businesses. That is what we've already started to do. And that's for a number of reasons. You can have the greatest impact quickest, where by dealing with one company you're obviously covering a larger percentage of those workers. But it's also the effect of the supply chain, particularly in a sector like construction, where you have the large contractor subcontracting, who subcontract again, until you get down to the sort of self-employed. So working with those largest companies, it means through that supply chain you can reach the largest number of people in the shortest possible time. We've educated many thousands of people. We've provided audit services to a range of companies, probably 30 or 40 over just the last 12 months. And I think we have already started to see improvements in the standard of health and safety in those organisations that we've supported. So up to this point we've had good success. What we need to do is get to be able to support many more companies, which we'll be able to do once we have a local operation there.